It's natural for humans to want to be around other humans, and bed sharing, co-sleeping is a very natural thing for us as the type of being that we are. Co-sleeping is how we traditionally slept. In a lot of countries and a lot of parts of the world outside of the US in particular, it's still the common practice.
I'm really excited to share some time and space today with one of our incredible graduates, Amanda Boyd. Amanda was a nanny for over 20 years. She's now a certified parenting coach here at the Jai Institute for Parenting. And as you can see by her woodsy, warm background, is located in the mountains in Colorado. Amanda, thanks so much for coming. I'm so excited to share your book with everybody.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. And then, just everything you do at Jai, which I would have never written a book had I not taken the steps and become certified and been working with parents. Because that's how the book came to be. Was a lot of my clients, it was a common, I was going to say problem. I don't think it's a problem to bed share or to co-sleep, but there comes a time when you're prepared, either you're prepared or your kid's prepared to make the transition. And I, believe that there's a way to do everything in a way that feels good for both parents and kids.
I love that. It's always, one of the great privileges of where I sit in this organization is to get to see the myriad of creative ways that our coaches like you are translating, adapting, providing this kind of framework to parents in different mediums. So I have your copy of my book, but mine's signed, you guys, from Amanda. So let's talk a little bit about this, because I know that sleep is such a challenge for parents of younger children, particularly those of us who have really committed to attachment parenting. What are some, from your perspective, having worked with so many clients through this transition, what are some signs that it might be time to start thinking about preparing for this change?
That's a great question. And so just for the record, I believe that like the book works well for even a little bit older kiddos. So the intention was, toddlers and older, because let's be honest, a lot of kids are still co-sleeping or bed sharing until 8 or 9. And then at that point, they start reading the book themselves.
Yeah.
But the biggest sign, and most is that the parents are feeling that they'd like a little bit more of an evening with their spouse, or even alone to themselves, because they find themselves going to bed at the same time as their kiddo. And they're just feeling that pull to, I'd like to have a little bit more adult time in the evening. Sometimes it's the other way around too, that kids are a little bit more ready before their parents. And some of those signs are, talking about their room or their things, or wanting a little bit more independence, especially at nighttime. And in my book, and the way I've always coached parents, and the way I've always practiced nannying, is not that you go from everyone sleeping together to independent sleeping. You never cuddle again. And bedtime routine is 10 minutes. Some people have asked me that, and I don't think that any kiddo's bedtime routine realistically is ever 10 minutes. That would be great, but I just don't think it's in
That
the
sounds
realm of,
very nice in fantasy land.
I was like, exactly, that's not the realm of reality. And if someone's telling you that, it's not 10 minutes every night, I guarantee it. No matter what, even if you're bed sharing. So I would say those are the two biggest signs. Is a lot of times it is the parents like, hey, I want some more adult time at night, but I also don't want to kick my child out and have them upset for something that like I don't find wrong, or I, still really want to do, but I'm also pulled in two directions.
Wow. And so let's talk about that parent who's, ready to have that freedom at night. What are some ways that we can start to have this conversation with our children and prepare them for this change, set them up for success?
Absolutely. So That's actually exactly why I wrote the book. It kind of goes through, and this is how I've always worked with all of my clients, is the first step is to talk about what it's like to sleep in your own room. Before you do it, before you do anything, even in my book, I practice, sleeping on a mattress or something in the parents' room before going to your own room. But even before you mention that, is bring the concept up, see how they're feeling. And one tip I have for that is to let your child do as much talking as possible, because usually in that moment they start telling you what their fears are about that transition. And then okay, I made an assumption that they don't wanna sleep alone because they're afraid of the dark, when it's really, "I like falling asleep next to you," and that's a different problem. Not a problem again, not
Yeah,
really a problem, but if it's falling asleep next to you, that doesn't have to stop at all.
right.
And I wrote the book to help parents talk to their kids and have the language that kids would understand. And it would feel good for the parents too, that it's a book that kind of goes through the steps, it's the progression. And it also talks about boundaries for parents, that parents do need some adult time in the evening, and I think that's an important conversation. And then at the end of all my books, I also include a page of notes for parents to kind of get some tips on how they can do that on their own. And even after they bed share, some ways to make some things fun. For kids to understand and to get playful, as and the connected parenting world is getting that connection, being a little playful also goes a long way, in when you're talking about it. So I'm a big fan of using stuffed animals to act it out, introducing it in the playtime with kiddos, especially if they're toddler age. That one helps them kind of understand in a way that they understand things, instead of lectures, which is, I firmly believe, no one really understands things very well, even if you're an adult, through lectures.
Yes, play is much better. So, what do we have this intention, we prepare our kids, and I could imagine that there are still kids that are going to have big feelings about this, that, may feel scared, that may be sad, that may be upset. How do you navigate that and the boundary while still wanting our child to not feel rejected or create a story that, we don't want them or whatever that might be through the
Yeah.
lens of a 5 or 8 year old?
And I love that question too, because I would say most times it comes up that the first thing that like a kid is going to say is no. And that's why it's good to kind of dig a little deeper and find out really where their no is coming from. But when they're afraid, one of the things I always remind parents, because usually if they're pushing back, that comes with a little bit of crying. And we've been trained to kind of think of crying as a negative, but crying is probably one of the best natural regulation tools that we have. And I encourage parents to reframe crying as an opportunity for bonding as well, because when you cry, your body releases endorphins, which helps you feel better, but it
Mhm.
also really releases oxytocin, which is a bonding hormone. And that's what's released, after you have a baby, and that's where you get those strong feelings. So holding space for someone after they cry is another form of connection. And so sometimes when they're upset, is the best thing that you can do is, hug them and let them know it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have these feelings. I'll stay with you as long as you need. And in those cases, usually we also make the timeline. So a lot of times the hardest transition is going from parents' bed to the mattress on the floor. It's not going to their own room. So sometimes that does look at like parents are mattress sleeping for, usually not very long. In my experience, like a couple days,
Yeah.
and I've had kids, by the time they're comfortable on the mattress, they're asking to go to their own room, and we've planned for doing a transition for 3 months, very, very gradual, very slow. And they're in there by 2 months, half the time, because it's okay for kids to be upset. It's okay to be scared about something new. And just letting them feel is, I think, the best
Mhm.
way of helping them in those moments.
I love that reframe so much because I think as a culture, we definitely have this impulse to fix it when somebody's crying or upset, right? We want to, distract them, or, for parents often acquiesce to, to stop the emotions. And this idea that the crying is really powerful and a natural part of our human experience, not something to be fixed, avoided, distracted from, ignored. I just love that so much, Amanda. So good.
Yeah, it's something I've actually personally been working on more, is being more comfortable with crying as an adult, because I tell everyone all the time and I let kids use it, use the tool very freely, but I'm like, I need the tool sometimes too. So then I remind parents, you might cry a little too. I mean, it's a big transition, and it's one that's filled with a lot of hope and grief at the same time. And those are hard emotions to hold in the body individually. So holding them at the same time is not easy for, most people. And if it is easy for you, it doesn't mean you aren't feeling those things also.
Yeah.
It's that balance of finding how do you do something that you would like to do and still hold space for all your feelings at the same time.
Hmm. Is there any point, actually got asked this question in an interview the other day, and I kind of tweaked my head, but it occurs to me to ask you your thoughts. So this was for an article. I think it was Jenna Bush was on the Today Show, and she said something about co-sleeping. And of course, the world, like, and we got contacted to contribute to an article in Parents Magazine. And the author asked the question, is there any age at which it's detrimental to children to co-sleep? And I'm curious to hear your perspective on that.
So that's why I always have the caveat of co-sleeping should end when it's not mutually desirable. And that can be the parents ready or the child's ready. And I think, I believe so. I'm also not necessarily a sleep expert. It's just something that I've helped a lot of parents do, because it's usually the biggest pain point. Everyone's not getting sleep, and so everyone's grumpy. And one of the things we talk about is when one of the parties is ready, then that's when you should work towards it and start actively working towards it. However, I have experienced, and I have kids in my family, I have kids that I nannied for that co-slept until, 10, 11. I know who they are as grown adults, and I know who they are as teenagers now, and you would never be able to tell. So I just don't think that there's ever a correct age. In fact, when I see some of these videos that are asking the question, a lot of adults are like, I still take every opportunity to cuddle with my mom in bed when I can, because I miss that.
Yeah.
And, I think that it's natural for humans to want to be around other humans, and bed sharing, co-sleeping is a very, very natural thing for us as the type of, being that we are. Co-sleeping is how we traditionally slept in a lot of countries and a lot of parts of the world outside of the US in particular. It's still the common practice. And one of the reasons why, not totally related, but one of the reasons why I also wrote the book is that it's really common for kids to either co-sleep every night or occasionally, like I said, when they're older, 9 or 10, but no one wants to talk about it because it's kind of taboo, and they get the backlash.
Right.
Like Jenna Bush did about it, when it's not, like you said, it's not detrimental.
Yeah. I have to say, my kids are 17 and 18 now. And when we go on vacation, we often, have to share a bed, or get to share a bed in a hotel room.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
My kids, maybe a little less, although I think maybe secretly they love it too. We have so
I
much.
know. And they'll come back around to it. That's the other thing, is there's a lot of things that, you come back around. When my mom and I vacation a lot together, I mean, in several countries, and we usually have to share a bed too. And other than, occasional snoring, it's fun. We watch movies together,
Yeah.
have a glass of wine, and sometimes we'll plan whole nights, oh, are we gonna spend time in bed or not? And those are still, really important. Again, going back to play, is like, that's the way that adults play.
Yeah.
And to still have that ability to play as an adult and have the connection with your parents. I work with quite a few grandparents, and it's always parenting doesn't stop at 18.
Mhm.
And most people hope it doesn't. That's the thing, is you really hope to still have a strong connection where your child does want to come to you when they're
Cuddle up,
35,
buttercup.
and so there's no, I guess, like, for me, I'm like, what's wrong with
Yeah.
wanting to snuggle?
What I'm hearing you say is, and it really fits into the ethos of Jai, right? All feelings and needs
Hmm.
matter. And we're going to work together to create solutions that support those feelings and needs for the entire family. And that there's no right way, there's no fixed way. It can ebb and flow. It can take 2 weeks, it can take 2 months. It's
Yeah.
all good.
Yeah, I always say one of the things I say to all my clients right like immediately is, I'm going to say some things, and some of it's probably going to feel really good and some of it's not going to feel aligned with your family. And you get to pick and choose what you take in and what you don't. That's the choice that you always have. And that's, also goes along with what you just said too, is, feeling what's right is just because someone gives you an advice on how they've done it. Other times, like you said, it might look a little bit different because your child may not really, ever do the mattress, but that's where you kind of get creative of other solutions that kind of mimic the idea of gently transitioning.
Amanda, thank you so much. We're going to link to your book below
Thank
this video in case people watching want to grab their copy. It's so cute, you guys. And with the elephant.
And
Love him.
elephants are my favorite animal,
Because
so
they're the
that's why
best
I picked.
ones.
Yeah, they are.
If people are curious about working with you or getting support as in your work as a parenting coach, how can they find you?
My website is missamanda.co. And then I'm also really active on Instagram at hello.missamanda.
You're amazing. Thanks so much for sharing your gifts with the world. So
Yeah,
good.
thank you for being part of the idea behind the book.
My pleasure. We get to do the best work.
I agree.